So as for general com comparison between Python and C, you can see this is not done by me, rather it's a standard website. You can see in the link in the description. It's a benchmarks game.team.pages, and these websites have basically compared Python programming with Go, Java, JavaScript, and it turns out that Python programming is faster than Java, JavaScript, and Go language, while it's way slower than C implementation. And you can see there are some live implementation results on the left side of it, while on the right side, you can see that there are other comparisons that are being done on that website also. So if you want to have a look on how faster Python is compared to C, Java, and JavaScript or Go, you can just visit this website, benchmarks game-team.pages.debian.net, and have a look at comparison between Python working with C. They also have some good implementation, like basic although basic, they're not really basic ones, but they actually give you they write intense programs that it will be really a comparison between a C language and Python programming. Because to have a comparison between print hello world and C and Python is not really the thing. Yeah, so it's a very one-line process, and it's not really a useful thing. So they write some complex things, they implement some basic problems or algorithms, and they test the Python code and their speed. And they're like CPU load, they're 100%, and there are a variety of it. Memory space. So you can see there is a clear difference between Python and C. Why? The reason is because whenever you try to save a variable, let's say for example, whenever I save an integer to a variable A. So for example, don't worry, we'll be having some live session also coding of that. But just to understand, so for example, if I have an integer 1 and I want to assign that to a variable A. So I will write A equals to 1. But for human readable, it's very easy to understand. So, okay, that's fine, A equals 1. But what happens on the lower level side is basically the implementation of C saves the reference count of that object, the object type, the size of that object or the variable, and the digit itself. So whenever you say saving 1 in a variable, it takes into account all these 4 parameters and then it saves it. And hence all the hard work is done by lower level implementation of C, while you still have a easy to learn programming language called Python. So you can see at the right side of this slide saying that how C integer would work. So it's just directly stored in the memory. You have stack and heap, while a Python integer would consist of Python object head, digit, and the value itself, right? Let us go and have some hands-on practice with Python programming. So you might be having some experience with Python, but I just wanted to demonstrate how easy to learn, how easy it is to learn Python programming. And the intention of it is just to show some variable settings and ease of operation. And for this tutorial, this demonstration, we will be using IDE, Integrated Development Environment. While for our course, we will be learning with Python, which is highly preferred by industry experts for development of any project. Let me just visit or open up my shell, and I hope you guys can see this. So if I ask you, it's a rhetorical question. For example, if I ask you, guys, assign 1 to a variable 1, A. So how would you do that? In mathematics is A equals to 1. And the same goes for Python programming. That's easy. While if I say, okay, assign 2 to a variable B, it's the same thing. And when I say, how about just perform some kind of mathematical operation? Okay, what do you want to perform? Let's say A multiplication B, A plus B, A minus B, and A division by B. And I'm going to perform another division, but which is more of a decimal level, which is more of an integer level rather than just specific decimal values. And I can separate all of this by comma. And if I just press enter, it gives me the result in the tuple form. It's a format that binds all the answers into one. And I said, well, this is fine. How about one other Python operation, say power operation? So I can just say it's quite easy. So double asterisks with B and you get the result. Since 1 to the power of n or infinite is 1, if I just perform, let's say if A is 3, and now if I just perform power operation, it gives me the result 9. Okay, well, that's quite easy to learn, but how do we actually use the syntax of Python? So for example, if I wanted to print the result, I would just use the print command, simple. And the interpreter, this IDE itself tells me, okay, you know what, whatever function you're trying, the first thing is the value itself. The first attribute, we call it, is the value itself. So yeah, that's fine. So let me just perform A multiply B again, A division B again, and that's it. So these are some values. And then it says if you want to separate them with some kind of things, okay, fine. Let me just use the separate attribute keyword and add colon here. So for example, and then close the bracket. If I just run that, it will just show me the result separated by colon. Okay. Now, what if I wanted to say, well, that's fine. How about some associative properties or some other data types in it? Well, Python has 4 common data types, which is Boolean, you have integer, you have strings, and then you have Boolean, integer, strings, and float, general data type. And if I just start assigning them, so this is 1 Boolean, while this is integer values. Now, if I just add this, just add double quotes or single quotes across any of these values, it will become string. So for example, 1, and now the fourth one is the float values. Now, you might be wondering, Sharik, how do we know if these are the other two, all the 4, let's say some data type? Well, there is a way to do that. So for example, we can just type in type because we want to know the data type, followed by we give them the object name. So here I want to first know the type of A, and press enter, it says class of Boolean. Similarly, I can just go on saying what's the type of B, again what's the type of C, and again what's the type of D. And we can just print on all of this, string, float, and A. Now, for example, if I have this, I can perform strings. Literally, the strings are basically the name. Or so for example, we have magister sign, right? And then, for example, if I have some other variable, let's say r equals to 1.2, but now I'm going to put that into single quotes, it will make it into a string. If you want to know if it is actually a string, you can get to know by typing it type r. And now that you have a string, or you can just print C, now that you have string here, you can try to access each element of this string. So how would you do that? Without programming, how would I access the first element? So for example, if someone says, what is the first element? So I would just go and say, okay, the element or whatever it is, it's saved in C. First would be the M. Okay, fine. All I need to take care of is that in programming, indexing or starting starts from 0. And when I just enter that, I can access first element. Similarly, if I want to access the second element, I can just give 1 here and then get the second element. Now there comes something more important concept. So for example, one more thing that we can perform is, how about Sharik if I want to access the last element of it? So it would be -1, which is called your negative indexing. Okay. And there comes a very important concept of any programming, which is your looping. Now, although we are able to iterate over the elements or the data type, say register sign, it's a string, we can access each of the elements by performing some looping operation. And generally in any other programming language, for loop is something like it iterates basically over the data type or array, for example. Now, how do you implement for loop in Python programming? But before that, how would you implement for loop in C programming is for, and then we start defining the data type. There's one thing you might have noticed, that although I'm trying to assign some data to variables, I'm not literally assigning or telling that this is the data type. And hence that's the beauty of Python programming language. Now in a C language, how would you do that? You need to declare the data type, which is a equals to 0, a less than 10, and then a plus plus. That's how you implement in C language, for example. But how do you do that in your Python programming? It's for loop. That's it. It's a for loop. It's a for loop. Now to iterate over any element or any data type, let's say here it's a string, I must have some kind of a marker here. So if I'm going to use some annotation and say, okay, first element is this one, while the second is A. So whenever I'm pointing towards all of this, I'm using some kind of marker and then trying to access these elements. Similarly, here what I need to do is I need to use some kind of variable, say I, which I'll use as a marker or iterable item. And across what or in which data type that I need to do is it's in C. And the syntax rule says is whenever you perform loops, if, while, define the functions, you need to end it with colon. As soon as I press enter, it gives me an indentation. Now here comes another important concept of indentation in Python programming. What indentation is nothing but some spaces. Why? Because the interpreter is the only way it can know that it's in the next line or it's in the loop or it's in the function is with the help of indentation. How does it get to know in other programming language? It gets to know with the starting and ending of the bracket or the colon here. For example, if I end a for loop, I'll use semicolon here. Oh, I can't use there, but yeah, I can use here. So this is how it understands that it's the end of the line, right? So how does interpreter would do? It's an indentation. Typically in a general format of PEP 8 or recommended settings, it's 4 spaces or 1 tab. While you can have, let's say, 8 spaces and whatever it is, but these are the standard ones, and developer across the streams or verticals, they will be using 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and or 1 tab. So it's a personal choice basically, but it's most recommended. Coming back to our looping, it's for I in C. I'm going to be printing I. That's it. Enter, and that's how you get it, right? So that's your looping technique in Python programming. Now, how about, can we use some kind of a different module in order to maybe, you know what, just give a pause between its operation? Yeah, of course you can do that. How? Let's use another module called time in Python. Now, this is just for demonstration. Of course, we'll be digging inside the topics whenever you try to take up the course and we learn it. Let me just start in how to import any new module or any library specifically. In Python, there is no library, rather it's called module. And before that, we have package. Package consists of one or more modules, while module consists of different classes and objects, right? So for example, if I want to give a delay in operation, I'm going to import time library. And that's it. Again, I'm going to be pressing for I in C, print I, but At every printing, I want to give a delay of 1 second. Okay, so in time, you can use it by time.sleep. Sleep for 1 second. That's it. Press enter, another, and you can see it automatically runs this. So it's that easy to learn programming in Python, while it's that easy to implement things here and there. That's the reason why different companies, so for example, as per claims done by Elon Musk, they use Python programming in order to prototype their products first, the operation of it, and then they can get back to C programming for faster operation. That's how you can use it in your existing applications. Because there is no comparison between the speed what C runs with versus the speed what Python runs with. So you can use C programming in resource constrained devices. So for example, if you're coding a microcontroller, it will have small RAM and ROM and etc. So you cannot use Python because it needs an interpreter. While you can use C programming language because it's optimized to run in constrained devices. So what you can do is you can run, so for example, if I had something like perform a 1 plus 2 and then perform a multiplied b, that's all you wanted to do and make your project or product. Now that you know about the concept, what to do and where to do, all you need to do is just search how to, let's say if I have to search on Google, I will just say how to assign variable in C. Simple. And you assign that. So you got to know it's int a equals to 1, or that's it. And then you can say data types in C. You get to know like it's integer, float, 32. So it's all, everything it will be all on your search. You don't have to hustle or remember things by yourself once you learn Python programming. But if you are proficient in Python, applications such as machine learning, data science uses Python and are highly useful because of their wide support and ease of implementation. That's the biggest catch why most of the companies, even the big tech companies, are shifting towards Python programming, is because the learning curve of Python is very small. I mean, if I can teach someone in 3 days or 4 days, I think a person who has some basic knowledge will be able to get his hands on Python programming and development within 5th day, or let's say week or next week. Now, why is that so? So for example, there are companies, for example, I cannot name those clients, but good companies, avionics or aviation related or even telecom related, they still have a need of a good C and C++ coder. Why? Because C and C++, at one time, C++ was almost dead. And there were very few trainers or very few experts who were expert in C++. It is very recent in C++ 14 version that it has taken the boom again, and it's being used in constant devices. Now, when the learning curve is such a huge or such a steep, companies cannot really invest in new hirings. So for 6 months or 1 year to make them proficient in order to develop systems which are deterministics. What do I mean by deterministic systems is, so say for example, you have aviation related, or let's say some fighter planes or some commercial planes. You cannot really hire a 1 year or 2 year of experience and then let him code for Linux devices of C and making device driver. He'll just make it crap out of that. And it's not just $2,000 product, it's a $1 million product. So they have to be very careful. That's the reason why a lot of companies are implementing and using Python programming in their existing systems. Now, does that mean Python can be used in embedded systems? Yes. Python, nowadays, there are development boards that can be used that uses Python interpreter in order to implement and perform their tasks. Going back to our presentation. So as I was discussing, Python has its importance and its modules across all the verticals application. So if I start with machine learning, we have scikit-learn, pandas, numpy, TensorFlow, and we have some database, distributed programming, grid computing, all of this sort of computing through Python. You have thread, you have multiprocessing. For artificial intelligence, you have OpenCP, NLTK, H2O AI, SciPy, and PyAudio, etc. For web development, you have Flask, Django, Tornado, Pyramid. All they are built around Python programming, giving you one-stop solution in order to implement and take your product from zero to hero. Now, the special case among these modules is Django. It is also termed as battery included. That means all you need to do is just use the existing function in this Django, and everything is done by itself. You need to understand the model view control of this Django, and then you're good to go. You can just deploy some kind of, let's say, username and password authentication within like 1 day, and you don't need to. All you need to do is some customization in libraries and etc. And then you have in embedded systems or IoT, you have PySerial, you have PyBLE for Bluetooth Low Energy, MQTT, AMQP, HTTP, and etc. like that. For networking, you can access, you can remotely SSH a Linux device, a Cisco router, a Juniper router, etc. You have twisted pair for different purpose. You have socket programming library. You have PyML for parsing YAML data format. You have request and beautiful soup in order to web scrap from online. And then you have in desktop application, you have PyQt, Tkinter, Kiev, and Py. These are like general thing I could just quickly take out from internet and give you a live on the examples or some namings. But there are like in-depth things. So there are like libraries for digital signal processing, which makes it very easy to implement DSP algorithms, let's say Fourier transform or Laplace or whatever it is. And common application of digital signal processing is the earpods that you hear your audio in. And the companies that are claiming very good bass and very good treble is based on signal processing, and you can use any of the library or C implementation or Python implementation of that signal processing. Enough of all those Python modules. Let me just take you to a interactive examples that I've kept as my personal projects that will give you a how Python is used in different vertical examples. Now they are not necessarily very high-end examples or end-to-end production level examples. Rather, they are just kept for prototyping and learning purpose, while a end-to-end solution, it takes time. So the intentions of this demonstration is to show you how Python is useful in different scenarios and also give you a glimpse of how Python can be used in these sessions. I'm going to go to this particular folder that I have. And I'm going to go to the code file, and starting with some GUI kind of application. Here's one of my students that learned developing GUI application using Python, and he has developed during the task. It was a basic task. He developed how to create a GUI using Python programming. That's a bit of a code that requires for PyQt. All I'm going to do is just F5 and run this program. It has some name, email ID, and phone number. Insert that, and gives you a message. The data has been inserted. Okay. Another similar application that I can give you for a demonstration is a GUI application that saves the data in some kind of database, which here I'm using as SQL. If I just F5 press this, and I have some window here that says, what type of access is this? It's an admin access. I'm going to put my name and put some ABCD, etc. like that, and then say submit. Now, it doesn't really perform here, but what I can do is I can just close this program, open up a DB browser to visualize or view the database. Once this open, I can just open up the database. Before that, let me just open the file extension, open up the database, and open up this. Here's the database that I've created, and it automatically got created as soon as I pressed insert. I'm going to open that and click on browse data. So you can see ASD, Sharik, and ABCD is what the data has been added. That's a basic application while developing GUI application using Python. A good project that I'm working on currently, and you will also get a chance if you take up the course, parts of this program you'll be working on this, but a good example of it is live plotting a temperature data. Now I'm not really printing a temperature data, rather I'm printing some random values. And if I just run this, and it will show you a good visualization example and plotting of the live data. So you can see it's a good, it's a mix of different modules called Matplotlib, scikit-learn, and all these libraries. And this will give you a good visualization of live data plotting. I hope this is useful. Now let me just go back and close this program and give you more examples. A more realistic example is how do we implement sending the data? Now, when we talk about TCP layer, just for a general introduction, there are 4 layers in TCP protocol, which is your physical layer, internet layer, IP layer, you have your network layer, and you have your transport layer. You have your transport layer, and then you have your application layer. Well, in the application layer, the importance of this is how 2 devices will talk to each other. So you have protocols, say, let's say SNMP, you have STOMP, you have, not STOMP, you have HTTP, you have MQTT, and all these protocols. I'm going to use MQTT example program and show you how you can implement that using Python library. I'm going to run that, put that into left side. Again, I'm going to open the subscriber program and put that on the right hand side. Let me just open up the previous program. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run this part, which is basically a publisher, which sends some kind of a message through this broker. That's the middleware or the server. And this guy over here on the right side, subscribe to the topic, the same topic that I'm publishing my topic on. And you will see you will get the data on the right side. So if I just run this F5, and you can see the data has been sent. Although you cannot see the data being sent because I've not print that, I'm going to minimize this and run this subscriber program, and you will see you're receiving hello messages. So that's your basic example or implementation of how you can use Python in MQTT, which is your application level of development. We use this for development of IoT product or projects, and learners across the different domains come and learn from me how to implement these things using Python modules. I'm going to again close this back and close this and show you another interactive example. How do we pass a YAML file? Now the code for this is quite simple, but it's very strong. It's very powerful tool in order to extract and parse the data of a YAML file. Let me just show you what a YAML file consists of and why, and give a talk about why is this useful. Now, it gives you a little bit of information saying the name, logging, or maybe some kind of a logging operation. But to be very specific, we can use YAML for giving the configuration of routers, and you can just parse the information and extract the data. And this kind of data formatting or data model is quite readable by humans also. So you can see it's very easily readable, and you can understand, okay, within the matches you have name, then you have regex, you have examples, and how do we parse it? That means how do we scan every line of code and print the result or read this file format. Let me just close back and open up this program. F5 to run this module, and you can see I have passed the YAML file, and this is how it has been displayed. Okay. Now, of course, if you have the model, so for example, you have an output, you can just say output and find out in the directory what's there in this. It says you can just copy, you can count, you can extend, you can index, insert, pop elements out, remove, etc. like that. Let me take an help of this interpreter or shell to get to know more about this variable output that we have used. And if we just open up this, it says it's an object implementation, and that's how these libraries have been implemented. Now, these are more of what a Python program can do for you. And I hope you have enjoyed or liked these demonstrations that I've given you for now.